I was in the lobby a little bit earlier today, and I was standing there in between services, and someone came up to me and they said, "Oh my goodness, last week when you started this monster series, talking about the monster of worry, that was awesome, so helpful last week. I can't wait for this week." And I said, "Oh, really? You know what it's on this week?" "No." "Fantastic. I'll see you in service." So we're talking about the monster of lust this week, which honestly, when we make an announcement like this and go, "Hey, we have a great children's ministry, send your kids there," I'm not talking about middle schoolers or high schoolers. They should be in the room. If you have a kid, they should listen to this week. You don't even have to tell them how to podcast it. They already know, okay? Let me say this. I want to talk about this in just a very real way without shaming people in the room. Because the church makes two mistakes on this. We either don't talk about it at all, and we're just not helpful to anyone. Because this is a real issue. And I want to talk about just real things in an authentic way and just broach it. But do it in a way and not make the other mistake and shame people about things, right? I met this couple one time, and they said, "Oh, we came to your church. Our first date was at your church." This is like a decade ago. They have like 6 kids now. If you're here today and you're just visiting our church or you're on a date with somebody today, I'm so sorry. This is going to be your most awkward date ever. And if you're new and like, can I just say, try us again? Like, come back. It's not always this confrontational. It's not always this awkward, because what I'm about to do is kind of the equivalent of a sex talk with your dad. It's just awkward, all right? So there it is. Where do we go from here? If you have a Bible, go to Matthew chapter 5. I'll eventually land there. Whether you got digital, paper, doesn't matter. Just see if you can find that there. And by the way, if I say digital Bible and you're like, where did people get this digital Bible? Just download the YouVersion app. All right, YouVersion app. It's a great Bible app. Let me start with this. Quick story for you. David was tired. And actually, he was exhausted physically and emotionally and spiritually, just wiped out. See, David was the king of Israel, and he had gone around and conquered a lot of the other neighboring kingdoms around here to provide for the safety of the nation Israel. And as the king, your number one responsibility is God. Second is the safety, and you go to war. Well, there's a rhythm to war, and the rhythm to war looks like this. You go out when the weather's nice. I know it might not be that way today because we have ways of keeping warm, but back in the day, when you would just sleep in the open country, like you didn't go out in the snow, and so you would rest during the winter. And when the springtime came and the flowers came out, you'd go to war. That was the rhythm. And that's where this story comes out, where David sends his armies out with his commanders to go to war. But David needs a little me time. He needs a little comfort, and he needs a little rest. The story is found in 2 Samuel 11. It says, in the springtime, at the time when kings go off to war, David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army. They destroyed the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained in Jerusalem. One evening, David got up from his bed and he walked around on the roof of the palace. From the roof, he saw a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful. And it was at this moment in David's life, and there are some things in David's life where he made mistakes along the way, but this one would be a catastrophic failure on his part that would have a ripple effect in his life for decades to come. But right at this part in the story where we stopped reading, there's nothing wrong at this point. I mean, there's nothing wrong with rest. There's nothing wrong with walking around on the roof of the palace. There's nothing wrong with accidentally seeing this woman where he could see from his purview from the palace. There's nothing wrong with accidentally seeing her bathing, but it's at that moment that David crosses a line, and here's how it reads, verse 3. David sent someone to find out about her. This messenger comes back and says, she is Bathsheba, that's her name, the daughter of Eliam and the wife of Uriah the Hittite. By the way, just make mental note on this. The messenger knows what's up. When the messenger is told, hey, go, and who is this woman? I want to know. He says, this is her name. By the way, this is her dad, and this is her husband. Because David needs to know. That's not just a woman, and even if it is just a woman, like that should be enough to be like, David, behave yourself. But pay attention. That's someone's daughter and it's someone's wife. It doesn't stop him, though. It says, then David sent messengers to get her. She came to him, and he slept with her. Now she was purifying herself from monthly uncleanness. Then she went back home. The woman conceived, and she sent word to David, saying, I am pregnant. David saw this woman and decided to entertain in his head for his pleasure. I wonder who that is. I wonder what her name is. I wonder what she's like. And from that point on, everything goes south. Because whatever it is that's in his head, in his heart, eventually we act on, and he commits adultery, which led to a whole series of new monsters showing up in his life. And don't miss this. All of this begins with the monster of lust. David's monster turned into an avalanche of bad decisions and monstrous consequences. So without reading the rest of the story, let me just review for you what happens next. And as I do, be reminded of this. We make really, 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 really bad decisions when we start trying to cover up things in our life. So here's what David did. He tried to pretend the child wasn't his. He had Uriah sent in from the battlefield to come back. And you need a little R&R, Uriah. Why don't you come in? And he's hoping that he'll go to his house and be with his wife and think, oh, this baby is his. Uriah, though, he's a soldier of valor. He's a soldier of virtue. And this is what he says to the king. The ark and Israel and Judah are staying in tents, and my commander Joab and my Lord's men are camped in the open country. How could I go to my house to eat and drink and make love to my wife? As surely as you live, I will not do such a thing. He's a man of virtue, moral conviction. And David's like, well, okay, if I can't get him to go there sober, the next night, he gets him drunk. He brings him to the palace, gets him drunk, and he's thinking, let's just loosen up his morals just a little bit. Come to find out, he slept on the palace steps that night, wouldn't go home. And at that moment, David decides to sink to a brand new low in his life. He writes a note to Joab, the commander, out in the field, saying this, put Uriah on the front lines. When the fighting gets fierce, back away so that Uriah is killed. And then he takes this note and he hands it to Uriah. I mean, his death sentence, looks at the man in the eye and says, deliver this to Joab. Knowing that Uriah is a man of virtue, he would never read a note from the king because it was not meant for him. So with his integrity, he carries his death sentence to the commander. And Uriah is killed. David then takes Bathsheba in to be his own wife. And you might think at this point, like, done, the plan worked, got away with it. The problem is that God will not let that happen, and there's this prophet named Nathan. God lets Nathan know, hey, listen, David has done something. He lets Nathan know, and Nathan goes to David and confronts him on it. One of the things that Nathan tells him, though, he says, there will be consequences in your life because of this. And here's the consequences. One, obviously, Bathsheba lost her husband, and Bathsheba would grieve over her sin, over the loss of her husband, knowing that it was part of her decision as well that brought his death. Second thing, the baby that they conceived, God said, that baby's going to die, won't live. And that baby dies. Then Nathan says this, David, because you have brought violence into your family, violence will never leave your home. Your family would turn against each other, and violence would mark the rest of your existence. And then there's a very specific result. David's son, Absalom, would get into conflict with David and try and take away the kingdom. And one of the things he takes away from David is he takes David's wives and brings them in a public area where everyone can see that Absalom is now having sex with David's wives because now they're his wives. The point of the story is this. It's a story of a comfort seeker who followed the monster of lust, which led to a lifetime of regret. We live in a culture where seeking our comfort, needing some me time, and even some time to rest. And you know what? My life's been hard, or I've really tried to accomplish a lot. There's a lot of things in my life that, we've done. So, you know what? Listen, I just need a little comfort, just a little peace, a little me time. And in that moment, there's opportunities as a comfort seeker to follow the monster of lust, which very well could lead to a lifetime of regret. Why do I tell you this story? I lead with it because of this. I just wonder how many Bathsheba moments David had. I mean, was this the first time he ever faced that kind of situation? Or did he face that like every month? Like, oh, there's another woman over there. I mean, his view from the palace might have been like, whoa, 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 hey. Or is this like the one time in his life where he faced it? We're not sure. But what I am sure about is this. We have Bathsheba moments every day, multiple times a day. Go to the mall. There's mannequins with hardly any clothes on. They leave nothing to desire. And women are like, mannequins? Is that really a... Don't ask the guys around you. There's posters and billboards all over the place that are visuals for people who are actually the monster of lust. Just go through the grocery line at the store. The monster hangs out there as well. By the way, you do not need to go looking for the monster of lust. He will find you. He'll find you on TV commercials, internet pop-up ads, freeway signs, and your social media. We live in a culture filled with Bathsheba moments where it's incredibly difficult to silence the monster of lust. Guys, this is more our battle than it is women's. But women, don't tune me out. I'll say this, that statistics say that about a third of women view porn on a regular basis. Okay? About 15% of self-professed Christian women, okay, are looking at porn on a regular basis. They say that 65% of guys are watching it on a regular basis, and 64% of Christian men are looking at it on a regular basis. Ladies, you're not immune to this monster. And actually, if this is not your issue, fantastic, that is great. I guarantee, though, you know multiple people that this is their issue. The monster of lust, don't miss this, is fed by the porn industry. So I want to just ask a series of questions. Number one, how big is the porn industry? 25% of all the activity in the world on the internet is related to porn. 1 in 5 movies that are purchased or rented is porn. Hollywood makes how many movies a year? Not porn movies, just Hollywood makes how many movies a year? About 400. How many movies does the porn industry make every year? 11,000. $57 billion industry, and 90% of it's free. Men search for porn online more than any other subject. By anybody's standards, the porn industry is massive, which means this. The porn industry is feeding the monster of lust of our society, and that's not just for the world. I mean, it's for us in the church as well. So question, is porn ruining people? That's a great question to ask. I know that there's some of you that you're going to say porn doesn't hurt anybody, and you're pretty sure that what you're about to hear from me is hey, God hates porn and God even hates sex. Let's be super clear right up front. God created sex, and He created it not just for procreation, but to be fantastic. He creates a man and a woman, the first two, and His first command to them is have at it, have fun. It's a loose translation of the book of Genesis, all right? But it's essentially there. And so here's what I want to do right now. I'm going to give to you a bunch of statistics. I know, I get it. There's there's lies and really bad lies and then statistics, right? Okay? But even if these are off by some, there's some evidence here. And so I'm going to give you some evidence that is not a Christian perspective. These are not Christian sources. These are non-Christian sources. These are people who are saying that pornography is ruining individuals and ruining relationships. And they start stacking up these stats. GQ Magazine 2013 wrote an article entitled 10 Reasons Why You Should Quit Watching Porn. Number 1, the Coolidge effect means that to attain the same high and excitement from porn requires new experiences all the time. That's why when people get into porn, they're like, oh, I'll look at this, but I won't look at that. But listen to this, 64% of those watching porn say their tastes have become extreme or deviant. Why? It requires more and more and more for the same amount of high. Second, porn's addictive. Scientists at Cambridge University recently studied the brain scans of porn addicts and found that they look exactly like those of drug addicts, which means even when we want to silence that monster, we can't. 59% of college-age males are watching between 4 and 15 hours of porn every week. 42% of college males are viewing porn every day. 53% of people viewing porn began their habit between, here it is, listen, the ages of 12 to 14. 16% of those college males say that they began watching before the age of 12. I think this is what's ironic. The predictions about the porn industry was, if it gets too massive and everybody's watching it, what we're going to have are people who are just crazily desiring sex all the time. You know what research has showed us? The exact opposite has happened. What happens is that when people watch this and they find their satisfaction there, they found that 25% of males, if they're watching porn on a regular basis, their desire for their spouse has decreased. Physiologically, they are having a much harder time emotionally and physiologically having sex and enjoying it. The stats are all in there. You can read those for yourself. One article from divorce lawyers, they wrote this, 56% of divorces involved pornography. And here's where our culture doesn't even make sense. We live in a Me Too generation, right? Me Too generation says, listen, you can't use me, you can't treat me that way, you can't power up on me, you can't exploit me for my gender, you can't exploit me sexually. And yet that same Me Too generation treats women as objects. And I know there's even people that will say, no, listen, women who want to belong to that and want to view that, like, they're actually empowered, it's their choice. Crap. Majority of women involved in the porn industry are actually, it's drug related. Drugged during or drugged after or before. I just don't get how our culture could be so far behind this Me Too generation and yet be willingly accepting of mostly women being engaged in the porn industry. Listen, the average age of a woman in porn, I misspoke that. The average age of the girl in porn, 17 years old. And the average time that they're in the industry, 16 months. Done, over, discarded. Time magazine, if a married couple begins to view porn, they're twice as likely to get divorced. Don't miss this. If the woman begins to view porn, they're 3 times as likely to divorce. I appreciated how one person put this. This is a pastor, and he just made this statement. Porn has redefined relationships in our country. It's changing what men expect in relationships, and it's changing what women are willing to accept in relationships. Here's what it is. It's ruining people as individuals, and it's ruining relationships. So I'm just going to state this. These are just a few stats for you. You can do this research on your own. Just be very careful how you do that Google search. If you're of the opinion that, listen, no one gets hurt, it's not bad for you, it's not bad for our marriage. Listen, if you're going to hold that opinion, you're going to hold that opinion in the mound of evidence, both psychological, medical, scientific evidence that says you're wrong. It's just not true. And I would actually challenge you and even dare you, if you think it's not hurting anyone, you go do your research and come back and bring me your research and we can talk about that. Because you just don't have any evidence to stand on. Jesus, by the way, I told you this from the very beginning. I'm doing my very, very, very best to talk about this in a way that's not shaming. But my desire to convince us, okay, we have a problem. Please don't take that as shame. It's not. I want to do this in a way that's really helpful. And so both men and women, I hope you find hope in today. Jesus speaks words into this in Matthew 5. If you had your Bibles open, 5:27. He begins by stating an old code. Hey, this is the standard. Here's the bar. And this bar is from the Jewish Bible in the Old Testament. He says this. He says, you've heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. Okay? Number 7 of the 10 Commandments, you should not commit adultery. And then he goes on to say this, but I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. What? Here's the standard. Here's the bar. Don't commit adultery. And we're like, okay, that's an action. Like, you'd have to do a lot. Like, you're not going to walk out your front door and, like, trip and be like, oh, I committed adultery. She was walking by right at the wrong time. I tripped and fell. And But lust, Jesus? Like, that's not even like a behavior out here. That's just David sees Bathsheba and goes, that pondering, like, sinned. He's like, you might as well have committed adultery with her because it's the same. You're like, oh, why would Jesus say that? I mean, why would he raise the bar so high? And I think one of the reasons is because I think we are tremendously capable of trying to keep a squeaky clean appearance on the outside when what God said to us is this. Here's what it means to be a Christian. It's love God and love people. It is not behave this way or behave that way. It's actually an issue of the heart. And so Jesus knows this, that our humanity has a tremendous capacity to try and look good on the outside, but be really corrupt on the inside. And he's done with that. That's religion. Trying to behave on the outside and being corrupt on the inside. To have a relationship with God, it's about having our hearts right with God. So if that's the new standard, which one of us is innocent? Well, I'm just going to say no one. And that's one of the reasons why Jesus dies on a cross for our sins. But his forgiveness is not a license for us to do whatever we want. He says, don't sin in this. Don't even look lustfully on a woman. By the way, when Jesus uses this word lust, he has a lot of options of words that he could choose. The word porneia is accessible to him. It's where we get our word pornography from. He could have used that word, and he doesn't. He uses a separate word called epithumeo, which is used in the Bible for just a general desire, longing, passion, and not even for something negative. You would have to know the context. Is it being used negatively, or it's a passion for justice or something? They could have used the same word. The word essentially means this. It means greed. It means you're going to take something that doesn't belong to you and extract it from somebody for your use or your pleasure. What are we greedily extracting people from? Humanity is the only part of God's creation that was created in the image of God. Which means this, we're the only thing that God created that has capacity to be in relationship with God, which means that because we have his image, that's not a physical thing like, oh, God has hair, God has a face, God has hands. It's a spiritual thing that we are the only ones created in the image of God to have relationship with him. There's a dignity and a value to that all in of itself. Your dignity and value does not come because you're a Christian. Your dignity and value because you were born into the human race. And lust is the capacity to say, I am going to take from you dignity and value because I am just going to use your body, whether it just be staring at it or using it, and I'm extracting the dignity from it because I'm using you for my short-term pleasure. Guys, let me say this in a little different way because I don't know if the reality of it hits us hard enough. And maybe when you have a daughter or a granddaughter, and you can imagine some man, boy, person, another woman, using your daughter or your granddaughter to extract momentary pleasure, to devalue her. What kind of rage would that induce you? What kind of rage would that induce in you? And yet here's the crazy part about how we're wired. We don't think about that at all when an image on a screen pops up. I know that Jesus understands humanity like I'm going to set lust as the bar. And some of us will make deals with Jesus. Okay, Jesus, listen. Here we go. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to cheat much on my taxes. I won't kill people. I won't. And you're going to go down the list of all the things that you either don't struggle with or you have such a high moral standard in that area. You're like, Jesus, I won't do that. But this over here, lust, really? God. Jesus gives us how intense he feels about this in the very next verse. I didn't read the whole thing. He said, if your right eye causes you to stumble, here's what you do. Ready? Gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. Let me be super, super clear about this. He's not speaking literally. He's not saying, I want you to take your eyes and rip them out. What he's trying to say is, I want you to understand the serious nature of lust. Why? Because he understands what kind of monster it is. Many of us will fail at silencing the monster of lust, but don't miss this. It's why Christ went to the cross, to forgive us. And so please hear me. If this is one of your issues, one of the things that you struggle with, I don't want you to leave here hopeless. I guarantee you'll have future failures. I'm going to teach you how to kill the monster in just a minute, but I just want you to understand you'll probably have future failures at this. But the death of this monster is not something that happens quickly. It happens over time. Let me show this to you real quick. Paul, one of Jesus' followers, he writes a letter to a church, and this is what he writes. It is God's will that you should, and that's fantastic. That's a great way to start, right? Hey, it's God's will. Have you ever asked, God, I just want to know, like, your will for me. Like, if you could just tell me your will for me. There's multiple places in the Bible where it says, this is God's will for you. And this is one of those places. So if you want to know God's will for you, here's one of the verses. Here it is, ready? It is God's will that you should be sanctified. I know that didn't bless hardly any of you because no one knows what it means. It means to be set apart, meaning if you're going to have a standard in your life, what it will do is it will set you apart from the rest of people. If you decide to agree with Jesus and say, listen, lust, it's not right, it's wrong, it ruins people and it ruins relationships. If that's what you're going to say, and pornography is feeding that monster of lust, if you're going to say that, listen, you're going to be set apart over here, and other people in your life, they're going to be over here, and they're going to be looking at you like, you're weird. Not only that, you're not only weird, but you are so judgmental. And by the way, some people in this camp over here, there'll be some Christians over there as well. Like, oh, wait. Why are you making your values and pushing them on me? I'm not making my values on you. I'm just stating that Jesus, I'm going to agree with him. God's will for you is you to be set apart, that you should avoid sexual immorality, that each of you should learn to control your own body. That's so weird. Because what does our culture say? It's not about you controlling your body. You should express yourself. That's who you are. Be who you are and express whatever it is that lives in you. It's like, no, control your body in a way that's holy and honorable, not in passionate lust like the pagans who do not know God, and that in this matter no one should wrong, or here it is, or take advantage of a brother or sister. Because it's robbing him of dignity. There's going to be plenty of people who say that, listen, boys will be boys. Hey, it's not that big of a deal. Jesus disagrees with you. I think we should jump on his side. So in the midst of this, here we go. So where do we go from here? What do we do? I'm spending the majority of time talking about, like, here's the problem, here's Jesus' view of this, but I want to end this with, so what do we do? There's actually three problems with pornography. So if you're going to kill the monster of lust, you have to kill the feeding of him, and porn feeds it. Number one, the issue is this, it's availability. Your digital devices give you access, so limit your digital devices. Get a filter. Go to Covenant Eyes. I gave you a whole list of resources. By the way, that took me about a whole 15 minutes to come up with, the resources. You can find resources out there. It's not a matter of not finding them. They're totally available. You just got to go get them. Filter all your resources. I made this deal with my son. I said, okay, listen, here's what we're going to do. You got a smartphone. I got a smartphone. We're going to put filters on here, parental codes. And I said, I'm going to put a code on your phone. And I typed in his code and made sure that I had it. So in case we need to adjust the filter, we can. I give him my phone. I'm like, you're going to keep the filter on my phone. Boom, boom, like, he types it in. It's probably like a year later, I get my phone and I was like, oh man, for some reason it won't let me do this search. And look, Austin, it's an honest search. I'm not looking for anything bad. I said, could you put the code in so that it can okay this? He's like, I didn't write that code down. So if you give your kid the code to your phone, I'm just saying, like, I don't know what my code is, so there it is. Availability. Would you change your availability? And I don't mean just to porn sites. Would you get rid of anything, gouge it out, and throw it away if there's anything that you look at that you know is feeding the monster of lust? For some of you, it'll be social media. There's some stuff on social media that is just access right there in your hand, and you're like, listen, delete the app from your phone. Delete it from your iPad. You're like, oh, no, I have to have Facebook. It's like I need it. Oh, well, actually, you need Jesus. But okay, if you need Facebook, then you put it on the central computer in your house where everybody has access to. Oh, we don't have one of those computers. They're all in the back bedrooms. Like, well, move it. How bad do you want it? How bad do you want freedom from this? How bad do you want this not to be an issue in your life? Then you only look up your social media there. I know that there's some of you like, not have social media on my phone? Like, who would do that? I know. See, remember, set apart? There's going to be a group of people who will look at you and be like, why would you do that? Be like, because it's the monster of lust, and I got to stop feeding it at some point. You might think I'm crazy and weird, but this is the standard I'm going to set. Just get rid of everything if it's causing you an issue. I think that's more in agreement with Matthew chapter 5 that Jesus is saying, like, take away whatever it is that's causing that. Second thing is this, acceptability. People will tell you it's not a big deal. This means you need to change your mind. Agree with God. I have some really bad news for you, though. Are you ready? When you change your mind about it, your mind won't change about it very quickly. Picture a dirt hillside, and at the top of the dirt hillside is a hose turned full blast. How does water run down a hill? Does it run down a hill like evenly and kind of erodes the whole thing evenly? No. The water always goes on the path of least resistance onto the low points. And then when the water finds that low point, it just starts creating a channel, and pretty soon the channel's a gully. What I want you to understand is this. That hill is your brain. And the way neuroscience works, the neurology of your brain, is that when lust goes there, you do something about it and you feed it down one of these channels. And the more you do it, the deeper the grooves and gullies in your brain, that when lust comes in, you don't even have a choice anymore. You're just doing the thing you've always done because it's created channels in your brain about how you respond to that. Scientists are finding this out. I told you that the brain scans of a person addicted to porn is the same as the brain scan of a person addicted to drugs, right? If you have a hope of changing your behavior and how you think about this, it is possible. Neuroscience says this: the more you stop what you're doing and use whatever you can to start diverting channels into different areas, those channels will actually get deeper. But what they're saying is this: the channels that you've built about how you deal with issues, they never actually disappear. You're just diverting them in a different way to a new behavior, which means this: there can always be that moment in time where you're like, man, I have slayed that monster. And then a day and a time comes up and you are a comfort seeker just thinking, oh, it's not that big a deal anymore. And boom, that monster's right back in and that channel is full. I know I've tried to explain that in some physiological terms and probably didn't do a very good job of it, but just understand it's so extremely addictive. If you've been watching porn for 3 or 4 months, you've been digging a gully in your head. I would almost say 3 or 4 months in, you're addicted to it. Third A, anonymity. I remember when I was a kid, I had church friends, and I use that term loosely just because we met at church. That's as churchy as they were, okay? I got in more trouble with my church friends. I can remember one of them saying, we're like 10 years old. Like, I'm going to go to the liquor store across the street from church. Let's ditch. And he goes, I'm going to go buy a magazine. 10 years old, I was like, magazine? What do you mean? Like, you're going to go in and buy a magazine from you're going to buy a magazine? The kind that, like, have a cover over where you can't see the cover because everything inside is porn? Like, I was like, I'm not doing that. And it's not because I had this high moral standard. There was something in me that's like, there's no way I'm walking into a shop looking face to face with someone saying, I want to buy this, right? Like, my luck would be like, that guy knows my mom. But today, anonymity is that we can get it on any digital device. And so if anonymity is a problem, would you please tell somebody about your problem? I know for some of you, let me just give you a quick resource. San Jose Christian Counseling Center. Fantastic place. Great counselors. I know quite a few of them. Can I just say this? Sometimes it's easier to go to talk to somebody you don't even know than it is to talk to people who know you. Go talk to somebody. Men, there's men in this church who would be happy to talk to you. I'll tell you who they are, and you let me know. But talk to somebody. And you need an accountability partner. Somebody, listen to this, that you can call any time of the day or the night, and they understand. 2 o'clock, you're on a business trip on the other side of the world. You do not have to apologize for calling them because they get it. And let me just say this. Please don't make your spouse your accountability partner. Let your spouse be your spouse and not your accountability partner. I gave you a whole list of resources there. You can find these resources. Let me show you one last thing before we wrap up here real quick. If you're still in Matthew 5, flip back a couple pages to Matthew chapter 1. Matthew introduces Jesus into this story that he's writing, this gospel, this good news account. And when he introduces Jesus, he gives a whole long list of Jesus's lineage, his family members. And he gets to David, and he introduces him in a really interesting way. And I want you to see this. Matthew chapter 1, verse 6, it says this. And Jesse, the father of King David. He's just saying, hey, David had a dad, it was Jesse. And then David was the father of Solomon. And so he's just saying, like, this is the lineage that Jesus comes from. It comes from Jesse, David, Solomon. And then he says this, whose mother had been Uriah's wife. Why don't you just say, like, David and Bathsheba had a kid named Solomon. This is the kid after the kid that they had that died. You with me still? But he doesn't. He says, oh, yeah. Remember David's wife, the one that was Uriah's wife? He's introducing David's failure and the whole story from 2 Samuel 11 and 12. Why would he do that? I have a sneaking suspicion of this. Matthew just wants to remind us that Jesus comes from a pretty messy background. And when David made some huge errors in his life, God was not done with him yet. This is after. God could have just totally abandoned David, and he doesn't. David still was used by God in some amazing ways. But can I tell you what made David usable to God? It's actually written down by David in Psalm 51. Let me read to you what David writes. He says, have mercy on me, God. According to your unfailing love, according to your compassion, blot out my transgressions, wash away all my iniquity, and cleanse me from my sin. What he says to God is, I messed up big time. Adultery, murder, scandal, cover up. God, that's me, and I'm so sorry, forgive me. He can read Psalm 51. It's a total confession of what he does. And then he says this, God, I not only confess this to you, but I want you to do something for me. God, here it is. Create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. God, my spirit's not right. Make me right with you. Do not cast me from your presence or take your Holy Spirit from me, but restore to me the joy of your salvation. Listen, if you're struggling with this, your joy is gone. Because, God, I want to know what I knew before, that joy of having you in my life, the joy of your salvation, and grant me a willing spirit to sustain me. Hey, like I said, if this is your first Sunday with me, come back. I mean, just understand, he's repenting of this. He's turning away. He's saying, God, I agree with you. I was totally wrong. Only by your grace and mercy can you help me and save me. So hear me. If you're struggling with, there's hope. God's not done with you yet. If you're struggling with this, there's hope. If you are struggling with this, there's hope. And this group over here, even for you, there's hope. We're finished with this. I know there's some of you in the room. I'm going to talk to 3 people. You might be the progressive person, the person who is in the room who says, no, listen, porn is just not that bad. And, I'm just going to tell you, you're absolutely 100% wrong. It will ruin you and ruin your relationships. There's another group that are the addicted ones, and I don't want you to walk away without hope. But I have to tell you this. The monster of lust is not one that you slay. The church gets this wrong. I mean, Jesus could do a total miracle in your life today, and you're like, I walked in addicted, I walked in stuck in this, I walked out and Jesus forgave me. Not only that, but he totally changed the neurons and the way that my brain functions, and I no longer even lust. That could be a miracle of God. But I'm going to tell you this, the monster of lust is not something that you slay. The monster of lust is something that you starve. Don't feed it anymore. And slowly but surely it will starve, become emaciated, and it will die. And we're going to celebrate its death all the way through. But you have to starve it. Actually, what you do is you replace the old habits and ways of thinking with new habits. And I'll just tell you, some of the new habits are on here from your card last week. I hope you had this. Pray that early and often. Fill your head with God's word. To the addicted ones, I hope you get there's hope. Last thing, and I need to wrap this up. I want to speak to the victims in the room. By victims, I mean this. If you have a spouse who is addicted to porn or watching on a regular basis, I have 3 things to say to you. You are not the cause. And you do not have control over the situation, and you are not the cure. I tell you that because of this. I know that there's some women who would say, listen, if I was more this and more that, if I looked like this, if I paid more attention, if I was more available, if I was, just stop it. You are not the cause of that person's decisions. You're also not in control. No matter what you do, you can't control them. I do want to say that you're also not the cure. You're not the one to get them out of the hole that they're in. There's another group of victims that it's not about the person you're married to, but somewhere in your life, you were victimized in a sexual way. Can I just tell you, you might not believe this, but God loves you. He's mourned with you over this. And I think that is something that God can not only heal over time, but he can actually touch if you will let him and just say, God, I need you to take this from me. Because once again, that wasn't your fault. You were not the cause, you were not the control of it, and you're not the cure for that person. I want you to understand God's tremendous love for you, that he weeps with you over that, and that his hope is that you would trust him and find a place of healing and hope. Because not every man, not every woman who harmed you is like that. May God's people be a safe place for us to be truthful and authentic about who we are. So that we can present ourselves to God and say, God, this is why you died on the cross for a broken, messed up person like me. That I might find hope and healing and do it authentically together as a community of God's people. I pray and hope that you don't sense shame from me today, but hope and availability. Because we need to starve the monster of lust and kill him so that we can discover who we are in God and have the relationships that he designed us for. Let me pray. God, thanks for today. This is the quietest this room has ever been. Thanks for every person in this room. But I know that there's people who need help and healing today. And I pray that you would step into their world in a really powerful way right now, God. I pray that we would not think, oh, that was meaningful and not have an action of what we're going to do. God, if there's going to be change, we have to step into action and trust that you're going to lead us to the right people and the right resources, God. I pray there'd be proper sorrow in the room, not one that beats us up, but one that leads to life change. God, let us know your love and let us know your hope today, that you are for us and you're with us. We pray this in your name. Amen.